Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're doing a full review of MixTape. Now we're not really going to spoil too much, but also I don't really think there's too much to spoil. I think ultimately there's a lot of things that people can derive from this just from the trailers or whatever, but I'm going to go through the story, I'm going to go through the mechanics, I'm going to go over the music and performance. We're going to look at reviews across Steam, PlayStation Store, Xbox, and we're not going to go over PlayStation Time Tracker or Xbox Most Played this time because they're not even on the list, really. So they don't really show up. And then I'll also go over my own personal rating and why, and then just final thoughts at the end. So the story itself, you're going to follow three teens in high school with basically their last summer together before one of them in particular is going to go to New York to basically try to start her career. And this all takes place in roughly 1997, 1998, somewhere in that time period. The mechanics in the game, most of the game is built on what you can see as mini games. So we have skateboarding where you basically can't fail. There's auto rewind for you to try again. There's also a very uncomfortable tonguing game, which I think is unnecessary, but I just think it's hilarious because, yeah, still during that time, your first kiss was a bigger deal, of course, than it probably is today. But I think the reason why they designed it the way they did and also put it early at the beginning of the game is to make the player feel uncomfortable and to give them to a sense that this is not necessarily going to be a normal type of video game. There's also skipping rocks and throwing TP over a house, walking, jumping, flying, filling a cup with slushy, painting a door, recording a party, finding items, exploring three different rooms, and then one or two areas that are outside, headbanging music in a car, and also a lot of cutscenes and reliving a lot of memories between the three characters. So yeah, there's a lot of these kind of mechanics that again don't really fit together. It doesn't really mesh overly well. The story too is also choppy in and of itself, and it's also really hard to connect with the characters because it's like you're kind of reliving some of their past, but again, it's not necessarily congruent. It's more like looking through a scrapbook, and well, that's not as interesting when you're someone on the outside looking in. The music itself is, I think, very good. Very much from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even some of the 90s. I'm sure the licensing was quite expensive. There's roughly, I believe there's 24 songs in the game that you're going to hear, and yeah, all of them are real. And so, yeah, very expensive. That's definitely going to cost some money. The performance in the game itself is good. There's no bugs that I can find. But again, it is a little more difficult to actually find those bugs because there's no real competition. There's no real challenge in the game. Even when you mess up, the game is extremely forgiving. And so, yeah, basically, you're not going to feel like you encounter anything. But the characters themselves are in a 16 FPS clay animation style, which is very, very choppy, and people are going to notice that right away, especially if you're playing roughly at 60 FPS, which most of us will be able to do that, because again, there's not too much really being rendered that well on the screen. And so, yeah, you're probably going to be hitting that 60 frames per second target. If you're on PC, you're probably going to be getting quite a bit higher than that. And also, the contrast is pretty high with a lot of the defined edges and colors and all of that. And so while you're playing, the 16 frames per second of the characters is pretty choppy. But then, too, when we actually have video, their animation is more like 24 frames per second, like a movie theater. It's a little faster. So that's kind of interesting. And then you have the rest of the background and everything else running at 60 frames. So yeah, that disparity there is it's not going to be fun for everybody. I'll put it that way. Roughly, this is a 3-hour game. If you really buckled down, you could probably do it in 2. If you really want to go through everything and get all the achievements, you could probably do it in 4. The game is also $20 or on Game Pass. Let's go ahead and look at the reviews. So we currently have Steam. This is an 87.6 out of 4,000 reviews. We'll take a look, too, that the game is actually still on sale and probably will be, I think, through the 21st, and that's for every single platform. Take a look at the chart. Didn't get overly high, but it did sell, thousands or tens of thousands of copies maybe as people are playing this. But again, I wouldn't expect to see very high player counts to begin with, simply because Well, it doesn't take very long to play, so it's not like a lot of players are really going to be coming back. And then I also don't think a lot of people really actually finish the game. So when taking a look at the achievements, we see that actually 43.6% actually beat the game, which is pretty high. That's actually higher than I would think. But again, you can complete this, in 2 or 3 hours if you really want to. Taking a look at PlayStation, this is also a 4.7 out of 5 with roughly 2.7 thousand views. It is also still on sale. Take a look at Xbox. Even though it doesn't show it, I did look it up on my console itself. It is currently a 3.6 with 2,000 reviews. And roughly the breakdown right now is 59% is at 5 stars and 29% is at 1 star. So basically, you loved the game or you hated the game, and roughly about 2/3 liked it, and about 1/3 did not. 3 stars only has 3%, which is one of the smallest ones. So again, you either loved it or you absolutely hated it. For my own personal rating, the gameplay itself, I give it a 1 out of 10. And this is because most sections in the game, there actually is no game. It's either just kind of moving a character. A lot of times you don't even have to do anything. You can just let the whole sequence actually play. And yeah, the focus too is really on the nostalgia and the messaging, especially in the last few sections. But yeah, nostalgia of all of the things that you could have done or maybe did with some of your friends or whatever. And then also some of the messaging, especially toward the end, is actually pretty good, about friendship and coming together, and not just all about it being just you like with Rockford, but actually realizing, hey, it's about all of us. It's about the experience of life, and then also too the messaging and the nostalgia of trying to figure out exactly what to do, who you want to be, the direction you want to go, all of that stuff. We probably all deal with that, of course, in one way or another. The Rebellion 2 is a little over the top in the asshole vibe. It does get old in the game, but this is setting up the character development later for the story. My overall rating for the whole game is roughly a 4 or 5 out of 10. So much hinges on the connection with the music and the activities and the circumstances in the game. So, also, there's no real gameplay, and failure is impossible. So, there's also no real replayability for the vast majority of the game. And so the game is really specific for a particular type of audience that's really going to jive with this, which is again roughly about 2/3 out of everybody. But it's definitely not, in my opinion, game of the year material. The thing is that it needs to be a game first. I would call this more of an interactive experience than actually a game. And that's why I'm giving the gameplay itself a 1, and why I'm breaking it up that way. Because there were definitely things that I wanted to skip, that I wanted to progress, that I wanted to move forward on, and I wasn't overly interested like walking around a room picking up a bunch of items. Or I wasn't necessarily excited with using a slingshot or trying to skip rocks, when again there's really no challenge to anything, or even really doing the skateboarding sequences. While that was interesting for the very first one, we had several of those, and again it's basically impossible to fail or even splat on a car, because the game will just rewind you back, and there's really again not much else you can really do. So while some parts of the game were definitely cinematic, did look cool, the overall thing with the game is that it's all just kind of shoved together, and isn't overly sequenced super well. I'm sure devs worked hard on this, but the problem is that I just can't see it as a game. That's really my problem. And while I think some of the messaging is good, and I like some of the smaller moments with character development, the overall arching theme is that this is not really relatable to a lot of people. This again is going to be very specific for a type of audience, and even a certain age range, in kind of the way that they lived their childhood. So again, if you didn't live that way, if you can't really be relatable, again, a lot of people are not ultimately going to enjoy it. So if you're too old or if you're too young, again, you're not going to live in that sweet spot like these people are in the late 90s. And you're not really experiencing like what they did. Maybe you've heard stories, or maybe you didn't have any reference at all. So it's not overly going to make a lot of sense. Also, a lot of the music is actually also quite old, from the 60s through the 90s, and a lot of stuff that people remember today, at least younger folks, well, what they remember is basically 2000s or like 2010 songs. And again, we're not really getting any of those. So that's my overall score. Something else, too, I did want to say is that I don't overly think that the director and producer really care about what people think. I mean, do they look like they give a shit? Probably not. And yeah, they really wanted to craft a story around music. Well, they definitely did that. Music is very important to them. But yeah, the mixtape was supposed to be heavily inspired by 80s and 90s films, which, yeah, some of the directing and camera angles, I can definitely see that. There were even um, some actual areas and camera shots that related to specific movies, like Jurassic Park. So that was actually kind of cool. They also wanted to focus on an age old tale about friendships and passions, which, yeah, that was definitely a thing, and also just kind of discovering of who you are. And yeah, Mixtape is a work of love and passion. But again, not everyone's actually going to get that. And again, I don't think they overly care. They weren't trying to make a broad mass appeal type of game, I don't think. I think they were trying to share a message or something nostalgic with folks that were going to understand. And those are the ones that are actually loving and enjoying the game. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is published and in partnership with Annapurna. Now, Annapurna in 2024, well, they had a whole bunch of people actually just leave. The entire staff just got up and walked out when they couldn't really make a deal and take Annapurna private. And so they gave up. They quit. They all walked out. And it wasn't entirely sure if they were actually going to be able to make it, or if Annapurna was still going to be able to function and get their stuff out that they were working on publishing and already had deals with, but someone was able to take over that was still left at the company, and they were able to get some of their projects out, including this one. But you'll notice that Annapurna has kind of slowed down, and that's because, well, they had to rehire people. They had to get projects back on track and actually work on getting them out the door, and this was definitely one of them. So if we hadn't have had that, I think we would have seen this game last year. And Annapurna is still going, but again, they've had that gap. And then again, too, if they're having games like Mixtape, well, it might make them a little bit of money, but again, the licensing is going to be so expensive for those pieces of music. I'm not sure if they can actually make money. I would be quite curious. Now, one last thing I did want to talk about is just the kind of becoming of age story. And I think for a lot of people, at least for the people that resonated with them, they remember a time that was easier, that was more carefree and enjoyable. And that's the kind of part that they miss. Because, of course, as we get older, well, it is more complicated, it's harder, it's more difficult, and there's definitely more stress. And they make hint with this, with some of the scenes and some of the script writing about like it getting harder or how it's going to be when they get older, or what it's like going into adulthood. Because we didn't use adulting. Okay, that's a more common phrase today, but I think a lot of people that resonate it to a degree are actually still kind of stuck and do definitely long for being able to go back to a simpler time. Sometimes I think of it that way, but I don't overly think about it too much, because, again, my life has been able to move forward. But statistically, when we take a look at people, there's more people struggling with inflation. That's definitely a big deal right now. And so things are very difficult. Things are frustrating. And it's also hard, too, with so much technology, everything ready at your fingertips, to actually know what direction you want to go and what your purpose is. You're so inundated and distracted with stuff, not able to really find your way forward, or it's been very, very difficult, or maybe you're still struggling with that, to just maybe drown out some of the noise. Whether you play the game, whether you like the game, that's not my point in this section of the video. My point at this section is just to help you guys understand, to maybe simplify things a little bit. Focus on what really matters, on what you want the outcome to really be. And then think about things on how you can actually get there in little steps. It doesn't have to be all at once or all at the same time. Again, getting married, getting a house, kids, cars, my career job, well, they didn't all happen at once. They all took place over roughly a 15-year period. And that's okay. But, start today. There's still a future that you can have. There's still something that you can certainly focus on and obtain. And, work and practicing and being content. Not that you shouldn't stay where you are, but that you don't have to, you're not competing with anybody else. You're just competing with what you are capable of. and that's it. It's not what you're seeing online. It's not anything through Facebook. It's just with what you're capable of and what you're able to do in the now. And then continue to focus on goals every year for the future. And hey, eventually you'll get there, just like I did. So that's my review of MixTape, guys. Thanks for tuning in. You can always follow me over at Gaming Garbage 22 if you wish. You can also follow me over at Twitch when I do play games, which is not very often, at Don't Tread on Thee. And then, too, if I've earned it, go ahead and like and sub, all that jazz. And if you do sub, make sure you click the bell. Otherwise, YouTube is not going to be sending out any of those videos of mine in the future. And that goes for any channel. If you've subbed to a channel but you're not seeing it in your feed, go ahead and make sure you click the bell, or you like videos, or you watch them all the way through. That way you can get those channels in your feed. Because, yeah, YouTube is making it hard continuously. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys on the next one.